On this Wednesday night, time is running out to get people out of Afghanistan. Fresh evidence of the Taliban assaulting innocent people trying to escape.
Airport.
And the threat against female athletes.
The situation of our country is very dangerous.
Why have Ottawa's pandemic briefings been cut off during the campaign and a COVID surge? Plus, grunge grudge. He was a baby on this famous Nirvana album cover. Now he's suing the band.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The clock is ticking for 4 nations, including Canada, to complete evacuation flights out of Afghanistan. The Pentagon estimates there are more than 10,000 Afghans at Kabul's airport waiting to get on planes before August 31st. The Canadian government says it has already airlifted 2,700 people out of the country, including 1,000 Afghans. More flights are on the way. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he wants the international community to put pressure on the Taliban to allow Afghans to safely leave the country if they wish.
In the coming days, this phase will end, but there's a lot more work to do that we will continue to do to keep helping the Afghan people.
The federal government warns it may not be able to rescue everyone who is eligible to come to this country. As Redmond Shannon reports in our top story tonight, some Afghans desperate for Canada's help say Canadian forces at the airport are turning them away.
Desperate shouts from inside an open sewer. Hope is fading for these people who fear for their lives. If they leave this putrid holding area beside Kabul airport, they may never get back in again.
I'm Australian citizen, they hit me by...
Violent Taliban checkpoints surround the airport. Afghan citizens now struggle to get past. Global News spoke to a man who worked with a Canadian NGO. He says the Taliban beat him. Wednesday is his 8th attempt to get into the airport, having been told to go there by the Canadian government a week ago.
It's difficult to convince my family to come along with me and take the risk for their lives.
The man says Canadian soldiers have been turning away non-Canadian citizens like him.
They don't care about what documents you show them. They just they keep telling you that if you're holding a Canadian passport, we will let you in. If you don't, please evacuate the area with an impolite language.
On Wednesday, Canada's Defence Minister reacted to video suggesting Canadian forces were ignoring the pleas of Afghans beside the airport.
All these things will be reviewed, and I can assure you, every single Canadian Armed Forces members who have been there have poured their heart and soul into bringing as many Afghans to Canada.
Some apparent Canadian passport holders are struggling to leave too, although Global News can't verify the authenticity of the documents these people are holding.
There is the possibility that we're not going to be able to bring everyone that we want to when the air bridge stops.
The presence of Canadian forces is reportedly decreasing now. A Canadian C-17 transporter was headed to Kabul Wednesday night, Ottawa not saying when the last airlift will take place.
Our troops on the ground are leveraging every possibility that they can to get as many flights from ourselves.
The French government has already said it will end airlifts Thursday, ahead of the expected US withdrawal next Tuesday. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Beyond the desperate situation at Kabul's airport, there are urgent concerns for the well-being of millions of Afghans and the fragile state of the country's economy. Some banks are reopening after being shuttered for nearly 2 weeks, but it's unclear if there's any money to take out. ATMs have long run out of cash. The value of the country's currency, the Afghani, has plummeted to record lows, while food prices are rising. The World Food Programme says millions of Afghans are at risk of starvation, calling it a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe. 40% of the country's crops were lost last year because of an ongoing drought. The UN agency warns it could run out of food supplies by the end of September. To the COVID-19 pandemic, the Delta variant-fueled wave hitting Canada is only growing. Over the past 7 days, there have been more than 2,600 new cases, per day. More than 80% of these new cases are among people who are unvaccinated. And yet today there was no briefing from the Public Health Agency about these cases. Since the federal election was called, there hasn't been a peep on camera from Canada's top doctors. Global News has been pushing for answers. Abigail Bimman is on the campaign trail with Liberal Leader Justin Trudeau and asked him why this is no longer happening, especially with cases increasing in the fourth wave.
Hear me? I'm unmuted.
While they had regular technical hiccups, pandemic briefings have happened regularly for the past year and a half.
Daily in-person updates are really important.
But since the election call, not a one, though written updates continue.
If we allow a federal election to derail that job, right, that explicit role that they play, then to me, I start to question how much politics is playing into these releases, the timing of these releases.
And there's been no modeling update since July 30th.
We relate to people, not just to data. Data will be important, but it's clear that the way we're all built, we actually just want to hear this directly from the horse's mouth.
So we asked Justin Trudeau about it.
We know how important it is to end this pandemic once and for all. That's why every day I'm using the opportunity to speak to Canadians to remind them to get vaccinated.
Are you suggesting that your comments along the campaign trail about vaccination are equivalent to briefings coming from Dr. Tam and Dr. New? And as well, have you or anyone in the Prime Minister's office directed FACT to hold off on these briefings during the election?
During a democratic event like an election, our government and our officials continue to work every single day to keep Canadians safe.
He didn't answer me, but later said this.
Public Health Agency of Canada makes its decisions about how to best communicate in various situations.
Public Health told Global News the decision on how to communicate with Canadians is, quote, entirely within Dr. Theresa Tam's purview. But, like Trudeau, sidestepped the question of whether they had been directed to stop holding in-person briefings. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Richmond, BC.
Jagmeet Singh is in Windsor, Ontario today, where the NDP leader is talking about taking on the telecom giants for more affordable cell phone and internet rates. Canadians pay some of the highest fees in the world, but Singh promises he'll put a stop to that.
We're going to take on the big telco and say, you've got to stop gouging people and the rates have got to be more affordable. We're going to bring down those rates. We can make it happen.
Singh says he's committed to working with regulators to force companies to reduce prices and cap fees. He says under the NDP plan, the average family will save $1,000. The Conservative campaign made a brief stop in Brantford, Ontario today, where Erin O'Toole promised to boost healthcare funding if elected, pledging $60 billion over the next decade with a big focus on mental health services.
This will be the largest increase in federal health spending in a generation. It will reinforce and secure our public and universal health system. And it will enable the provinces to invest in mental health as the healthcare priority it is.
The Conservatives seem to be crossing over into typical NDP territory. In recent days, O'Toole has been making a pitch to unionized workers. And as Michael Couture reports, it's all about securing a broader base.
We will put Canadian workers at the front of the recovery. It's time for the government to stand up for workers and secure Canadians' pensions.
For 2 straight days, Erin O'Toole has tried to pitch his party as the only one standing up for workers. Monday, he proposed worker representation on the board of directors for federally regulated companies. And Tuesday, he talked about protecting pensions. Wednesday, an even more direct appeal.
I'm going to say to all Canadian workers, including members of unions, I'm going to fight for your jobs.
Union leaders aren't buying it.
Are a party for the powerful, the rich and the powerful, and they're surely not for the working families.
Let's not forget that. What did he do when he was a Harper cabinet minister? He supported the 2 most anti-labor bills ever to be introduced in this country.
Union votes have historically gone to the NDP. This is O'Toole's attempt to broaden his tent. It's a direct appeal to a number of ridings across the country that have flipped between New Democrats and Tories, like Essex in Ontario, where the NDP leader was campaigning Tuesday, and Port Moody, Coquitlam in BC.
Both Justin Trudeau and Erin O'Toole don't think that billionaires should pay their fair share.
Wednesday in Windsor, Ontario, Jagmeet Singh tried to differentiate himself from the Tory leader, pointing out Otoole voted against an NDP motion to tax companies like Amazon that made record profits during the pandemic.
So he might say what he wants right now in a campaign, but what did he do when he had a chance to vote? He voted for the interests of the super rich against workers.
That message could resonate here in Hamilton, home to the Canadian steel industry. It's also home to 3 ridings where the incumbents aren't running in this election, meaning those seats could be hotly contested. Robin?
Mike Otoole reporting tonight. Thanks, Mike. And ahead of September 20th Election Day, Global National is traveling across the country to talk to you, the viewers and the voters. That kicks off tomorrow in BC, and today Donna Friesen was out preparing. Hi, Donna.
Hey, Robin, I'm in Steveston, BC today. Off and on throughout the campaign, I'm going to be out of the studio and on the road. Tomorrow, our focus is climate change, which here in BC, because of the terrible heat wave and the devastating fires, moved from an abstract issue to a real front burner issue. We'll be traveling to Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, and we're going to talk to actual voters about what matters to them and try to avoid the experts because we talk to them a lot. No offense, but we do. So that's what we're up to in the weeks ahead.
But coming up tonight, what Air Canada is now requiring from all of its employees, plus the worries about kids going back to school and COVID not going away. Canada's largest carrier, Air Canada, will require all employees and new hires to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Workers must report their vaccination status as of October 30th. Air Canada says testing will not be offered as an alternative. Kids and teachers across the country are heading back to school, but the provinces have taken a varied approach in how classrooms will look in the fall and whether educators will need to be vaccinated. A new study, not yet published, reveals how sending children back without masks or vaccine mandates will only fuel the Delta variant wave. Jamie Maracher reports.
As COVID cases rise, Calgarian Courtney Dillenbeck has some reservations about sending her kids back into class next week.
I don't want my kids to go to school and get sick.
Alberta has put few pandemic safety measures in place for the coming school year. Instead, it's opted to leave the decision up to individual boards. 6-year-old Cece says, at least through September, she will have to wear a mask sometimes.
When you're sitting down, you don't have to, but otherwise, when you're standing up or anything like that, you would have to.
A new preprint study out of York University ran multiple scenarios and found when precautionary measures were implemented in schools, including masks, mandatory vaccinations, and physical distancing,
the difference in the total number of cases in the fall wave isn't huge, just because the Delta variant is already in circulation in the community.
But without them, Canada is on a troubling trajectory.
It'll just be insane, the number of cases that we'll get.
This week, British Columbia, Manitoba, and Quebec announced mask rules for certain grades. Ontario made the decision 3 weeks ago. But no province has committed a strict mandatory COVID-19 vaccine policy for eligible educators or students.
The benefits of vaccines far outweigh any theoretical or potential risk for that child, especially with Delta surging.
Dillenbeck's kids are too young to get their vaccines yet, so she says she's relying on teachers to keep them safe.
I would feel more comfortable sending my young kids to school knowing that at least their number one adult interaction is vaccinated.
Researchers at York University also found approving COVID-19 vaccines for kids under 12 could have a big impact on the outcome of this next wave. When that approval could happen is still unclear. Robin?
Jamie Maracher in Toronto. Thanks, Jamie. Finding affordable housing is a struggle for more and more Canadians, and it's become a hot-button issue on the campaign trail. The 3 major parties all have their take on affordable housing. Anne Gaviola explains what they have to offer and what might actually help Canadians.
Accusations are flying about housing affordability on the campaign trail.
Erin O'Toole would give your landlord a tax break on selling the building and do nothing for you.
We can't afford another 4 more years of broken promises from Justin Trudeau.
It's no surprise this issue is a hot one in the lead up to the federal election. What housing prices have done during the pandemic has defied expectations. Average sale prices are up more than 30%. In fact, since Justin Trudeau first took office in 2015, home prices are up nearly 70%. That's according to the Canadian Real Estate Association. Here's a look at what the big 3 federal parties are proposing.
The Liberals want to build, preserve or repair 1.4 million homes in 4 years. The Conservatives pledge to build 1 million in 3 years, and the NDP are targeting 500,000 affordable homes within a decade. The Liberals and the NDP want to increase tax credits for home buyers. The Tories propose tweaks to the mortgage stress test and insurance requirements to make it easier to qualify for financing, and the NDP would bring back 30-year terms on insured mortgages. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives propose a 2-year ban on foreign buyers, while the NDP strategy involves a 20% foreign buyers tax. Expert reaction to the platforms is mixed.
When it comes to affordable housing, on the rental side, the NDP platform, which focuses almost exclusively on that, is likely the better of the 3.
The Conservatives have the most comprehensive overall plan, which touches on many different areas, and they have well thought out detail as to how they're going to implement these policies.
For politicians, the challenge is finding the sweet spot, a plan that improves affordability for those struggling to get into the housing market without derailing the wealth building and retirement plans of existing homeowners. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Up next, the race to protect Afghan women in sports as the Taliban takes control.
You're watching Global National.
Team Canada just wrapped up its first day at the Tokyo Paralympics, and it was a solid start. In her Paralympic debut, cyclist Keely Shaw nabbed Canada's first bronze medal of the Games in the C4 3,000-meter individual pursuit. Later, Quebec swimmer Aurélie Rivard won a bronze during the women's 50-meter freestyle. 5 years ago in Rio, she won gold for the event. This is her 6th Paralympic medal. Those athletic achievements may now be out of reach for women in Afghanistan. Their rights and freedoms are on the brink of disappearing as the Taliban takes control of the country. And like thousands of others trying to flee, women and girls who play sports will likely face harsh punishment for simply doing what they love. Here's Mike Armstrong.
If the women in this video were identifiable, we wouldn't use it. It's just a bicycle race in 2017 through the streets of Kabul. But those streets are now controlled by the Taliban, and they are after women like these.
These women are on the hit list of the Taliban now.
Friba Rezai was Afghanistan's first ever female Olympic athlete. She now lives in Vancouver and runs a non-profit aimed at empowering Afghan women as leaders. This week, her work has been about trying to get female athletes out of the country and to hide the ones she can't. Already, she says the Taliban has gone to homes summoning women to Sharia courts to have their character judged because they played sports.
If they are successfully catching any of those athletes, they will face severe punishment from the Taliban, from lashing to death penalty.
Under the Taliban, women and girls are banned from sports. It's not modest, it's too physical, and it's too public. There's been a push this week to get female athletes out of the country before they're punished. One of the groups literally pulled out of the sewage trench at the airport and put on planes was Afghan female soccer players. A flight Tuesday carried 75 players, officials, and relatives flown to freedom in Australia. An evacuation flight to Spain carried a member of the Afghan women's wheelchair basketball team. Nilofar Bayat and her husband made their way through Taliban checkpoints, past beatings and shootings, and spent 2 days at the airport. Staying in Afghanistan, she says, wasn't an option.
Being a woman in the Taliban regime means nothing. You are not part of the society. You're just the one who can stay at home and doing nothing.
Mina Asadi competed for Afghanistan in karate. For a time, she ran a gym in Kabul. She says so far the Taliban has been somewhat quiet. She doesn't expect them to stay quiet.
Absolutely no. They are never change
and they are the same Taliban.
This female Afghan Paralympian made it out of the country to Australia this week. There is hope she may even make it to Japan in time to compete in her event. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with a young hockey player walking tall.
If we shift to the left, have you loosen to the right.
Small steps, but big progress. Ryan Stratsniski was left paralyzed after the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash in 2018. But yesterday, after 3 years of rehabilitation and surgery, he tweeted the video of his first steps with just a walker. Ryan says he's still trying to figure out the best method, but can only get better from here. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesen will be back tomorrow. Have a great night.